Okay, so why don't we talk a little bit about your work in film? I know you worked on 2001 A Space Odyssey. What was your role in that movie?
That was an odd one. Uh, I had friends working on the movie, and uh, they got behind. It was shot in England. They got behind on putting things in space. So, with 9 months to the launch date, as it were, their premiere, there was only about 25% of the scenes that had space behind them. So the process was Stanley's invention, and was so faithful to quality that every scene had to be shot with using up one more layer of negative and re-exposing it, putting it back in the dark. And that made for widescreen image quality that just had not been done at all at that time.
Yeah.
And they called it held takes. And they were adding components. But for instance, say you wanted to have something in front of stars, and the something had already been shot. What you had to do was you had to have blobbers. And blobbers were a room full of people with little enlargers and animation cells and images of stars and the images of what was supposed to be in front, and they would have to ink out the stars that showed through the thing in front, and that would be a layer that would preserve that in these giant screens in Cinerama and so forth. The animation, I got an opportunity to do quite a bit of animation for the Dawn of Man scene that the scene that precedes the Dawn of Man, and for going from the Earth to land on the moon, and then a lot for different shots of from the moon to Jupiter and toward the finale. So there was a stack of animation that meant the animation cameras were going to be working 24/7, and I had to streamline the results a good bit for us to be able to have the showing at the expected date.
Yeah.
In the course of that, I got to design several of the scenes approaching the moon, and particularly the different stuff going to Jupiter and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had a good relationship with Kubrick, not on the lot. Kubrick was truly doing incredible genius level work all the way through, and seeing that every part of it met that standard. So my relationship with him was across the street in his house after the day's work, and several times a week I would go over and he'd have the projectionist come over and show a few people that he wanted to show, and I would have a chance to talk with Stanley on different aspects, and we batted around different things as to how they would flow, and my imagination tended to be kind of an odd language like his was, and between those, sometimes we'd stumble in a new direction that was fortunate. Stanley's stuff was so good.
Yeah.
So good. I was outside his editing room when he was cutting Hal Daisy Daisy, his dying song.
Right.
And I was crying just hearing that being put together.
Yeah, being brought to life.
Yeah. And when it was still in the moviola. What happened one night at Stanley's kitchen, we made cold turkey sands, and he was down a little, and I asked what about. Turned out he had to fire his fourth composer. There was a lot I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about the music that had been there. And I didn't know until just today when I looked up some reference that that composer did not know that Stanley was considering something else.
Huh.
But the music was definitely not working for the newness, the experience of the film. Stanley always wanted it to be something that where you may not unthink it, but you wouldn't unlive it.
Right.
And so I thought about that while we were mulling, and I made a proposal. He had a 20-minute sequence of scientists discussing, when people just came into the theater, they would discuss the different things, and could somebody live with brief periods of no oxygen or and no atmosphere or whatever and whatever. And it was a roundtable discussion of that kind of stuff for 20 minutes before the film started. And I proposed something different. I proposed that we start the film with just 1 minute only of the title credit, with the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun. And they shot different versions of it, but I thought that a vertical reveal through then, that would be much like the space experience.
Right.
And that theme had to be as brief as Captain Nemo's, but it had to be a theme for the future, and that this would then carry throughout the film that feeling. It would break into chapters in a sense, but that that theme for the future should start off and conclude the film, and then suggested the music for Stanley already had been cutting the Blue Danube in to the launch from Earth up to the space station,
Right.
and going from there to the moon. And he liked that. And that one worked very well. So I proposed that the work of Ligeti with his atmospheres and some other was the kind of spookiness that the Black Block scenes and the mystery of approaching, always a mystery that defied entirely rational but incredibly powerful experience, and that from the apes on, that would be very effective when combined with that. I had previously used Khachaturian's Guyana ballet music with an animation sequence, and thought it was really good for the spacecraft and going peacefully through space. And then that rounded out the Strauss Khachaturian and Ligeti law firm that appeared in the titles.